Halo has a long, rich history of using metaphor, philosophy, poems, and literature in its deep-rooted lore story. It doesn't take a scholar to see the parallels between Halo's storyline and the Christian Bible, for example. Terms like Halo, the Covenant, the Ark, and John 1:17 all draw clear and concise parallels to established religious texts. Onwards from this, huge aspects of the deep lore of Halo 3 were built upon the Hollowmen written by T.S. Eliot, a poem that follows the otherworldly journey of the spiritually dead, wrestling with the ideas of death and the different circles of hell, with particular focus at limbo and these Hollowmen's awareness of the split between thought and action, their awareness of death's various kingdoms and their diagnosis of their own hollowness makes it very hard for them to go forward and break through their spiritual sterility. Onwards from this, Halo 3 ODST wrestles with these concepts still further, directly referencing the poem Dante's Inferno and his journey through the 9 circles of hell. An interesting and intriguing parallel being drawn between this poem and the fact that this particular game focuses on the ODSTs, otherwise known as Hell Jumpers, who travel feet first into hell. Even the level Data Hive can be referenced at going through the 9 circles of hell of Dante's Inferno directly just in one level, while the campaign as a whole could also be referenced at going through the 9 circles of hell. And even going deeper to the lore within the lore, Sadie's story can also be referenced as drawing parallels to Dante's Inferno. Even the now legendary Cortana letters, which were internal emails sent between Bungie employees back in 1999 during the earliest days of the development of the Halo franchise, directly reference particular quotes from T.S. Eliot's poem The Hollowmen that were again revived for Halo 3's advertisement campaign. I have done several videos in the recent past referencing these poems and literature in Halo's deep lore, all of which can be found linked in the description. But today we're not referencing these older poems in the older games. Over a year since Halo Infinite's campaign landed in our laps and we experienced the campaign for the first time, I'm sure many of us noticed certain quotes and references being woven amongst the deep lore of the campaign, specifically spoken out once again by Cortana, or more accurately the recursive code of Cortana's remains whispering out to Chief along key moments of Halo Infinite's campaign. I first began writing this script in January of 2022, and now, over a year since I first started writing it, I'm finally revisiting it and finishing it. Somewhat brought about by the fact that the winter update finally gave us the ability to replay campaign missions, this being yet another reason why Halo Infinite's original construction upon release wasn't exactly the best for the people playing it. In this particular case, in my own situation as a content creator, being able to revisit other campaign levels and spend some time analysing thoroughly those very niche and nuanced details of the various levels was a prerequisite to be able to go through and make a script that's actually got some coherence. If I wanted to revisit the Silent Auditorium before the winter update, I would have to create an entire new campaign and effectively try to speedrun as much of the campaign as possible just to get to the Silent Auditorium. Now, mercifully, I can just boot up my original campaign that I started back in December and go to the Silent Auditorium directly and play through it as many times as I see fit, which is helping infinitely in regards to being able to do videos like this. So let's get into the finer details of some of the campaign levels of Halo Infinite and draw out this deep narrative lore that's been sown throughout Halo Infinite, referencing certain poems.
Darkness had stretched its color, deep blue across the veins. No cloud to make night color, no moon with its tarnished stains.
These particular fragments reference the poem Waking by Aldous Leonard Huxley. This poem deals with love and connection in a transient, temporary life, in some ways mourning the limited time spans of our lives and our ability to love one another, and in some ways viewing it as completely pointless in the face of eternity, and in others celebrating the brevity of this connection as a particular point of beauty in the universe.
So, for the poem in its entirety, go ahead, Cortana.
Darkness had stretched its color, deep blue across the pane. No cloud make night duller, no moon with its tarnished stain. But only here and there a star, one sharp point of frosty fire, hanging infinitely far, in mockery of our life and death, and all our small desire. Now, in this hour of waking, from under brows of stone, a pale new day is breaking, and the deep night is gone. Sordid now, and mean and small, the daylight world is seen again, with only the veils of mist that fall, deaf and muffling over all, to hide its ugliness and pain. But today, this dawn of meanness shines in my eyes, as when the new world's brightness and cleanness broke on the first of men. For the light that shows the huddled things of this close-pressing earth shines also on your face, and brings all its dear beauty back to me in a new miracle of birth. I see you asleep and unpassioned, white-faced in the dusk of your hair. Your beauty so fleetingly fashioned that it filled me once with despair to look on its exquisite transience and think that our love and thought and laughter puff out with the death of our flickering sense, while we pass ever on and away toward some blank hereafter. But now I am happy knowing that swift time is our friend, and that our love's passionate glowing, though it turn ash in the end, is a rose of fire that must blossom in its way, though temporal stuff nor else could be, more than a nothing in today. The boundless specks of night contract, and in your opening eyes I see night born in day, in time, eternity.
This seemingly brought forward to reference the connection between John and Cortana, this love and connection that transcends just physical attraction. We have to remember that effectively Cortana and the Master Chief both coexisted within a singular mind for several years. This connection likely being more powerful than any connection that either Chief or Cortana had ever experienced, with particular emphasis on the fact that this is coming from Cortana, and Cortana's perception of this connection would have been markedly different from John's. Yes, there would have been a biochemical connection directly between John and Cortana, and John would have felt this quite acutely, but for Cortana, the years that they spent directly in connection with one another would have been experienced as a much longer and more protracted period of time for Cortana than for the Master Chief. Cortana is, after all, an artificial intelligence capable of processing information millions of times faster than a human brain. So the few years that they were in connection with one another, the years that she spent waiting for Chief while he was in cryosleep between Halo 3 and Halo 4, for her would have been several lifetimes. And that's not even mentioning the very origin of Cortana's existence being a direct flash clone of Dr. Halsey's brain, whom also has been revealed as having some connection, some interest and some attraction to John as an adult as well, with clear evidence showing that even though the donor brain may be wiped to some degree and destroyed in the first instance when the AI is created, there is still some bleed over of the original intentions, impulses and memories of the donor brain to the then formed Riemann matrix of the AI.
Yet another poem that we can hear Cortana whispering to John is heard in Foundations, and it's called Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. We're not going to cover this too deeply because she only really quotes 2 half lines from lines 35 to 40. The entirety of this particular section, lines 35 to 40, actually read, "The visible but their womb of birth, of orbic tendencies to shape and shape and shape the mighty earth, Eidolon. All space, all time, the stars, the terrible perturbations of the sun, swelling, collapsing, ending, serving their longer, shorter use, filled with eidolons only, the noiseless myriads." This, I believe, is more akin to a simple fragment of her rampancy left over. Some AIs in the latter stages of their rampancy do get very philosophical, and although Cortana was somewhat cured of her rampancy when she accessed the domain, this doesn't remove these philosophical inclinations. In some manners it can be considered as simply perhaps a memory or a random fragment of information that Cortana had processed at some point resurfacing, but could also have comparisons drawn to mortality. The sun and the stars seem almost infinite or a constant to a short human life, and yet even these seemingly immovable, unchanging objects still have a life and a death. And again, this may harken back to the particular scene in Halo 4 aboard the Infinity when Cortana muses about the artificial sun within Requiem.
I can give you over 40,000 reasons why I know that sun isn't real. I know it because the emitter's Rayleigh effect is disproportionate to its suggested size. I know it because its stellar cycle is more symmetrical than that of an actual star. But for all that, I'll never actually know if it looks real, if it feels real.
There is another half line taken from this particular poem where she simply says, "Yearning amply fed at last." This is on line 57, and lines 55 to 63, the very end of the poem, reference specifically the soul and the possibilities or the hopes surrounding the soul's immortality. So again, comparison could be drawn that Cortana at this stage is already musing on the possibility of whether or not an AI has a soul, and whether or not that soul is immortal. So moving on from that, let's look at the next interesting poem that particularly plays during Repository. It's a poem called A Great Wagon by Rumi.
Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk.
Again, these particular excerpts from the poem reference the soul. She speaks of when the souls lie down in the grass. This could be in reference to a form of limbo immediately following death, basically suggesting to John that upon her death she'll wait for him on the other side. Indeed, even the domain itself could be somewhat likened to limbo, and it's already abundantly clear that the soul or the essence of an individual can persist within the domain long after the physical body has broken down. This is particularly the case with the Didact, who was composed by the combined fields of multiple composers, with his essence likely finding the domain thereafter. And again, it's even fully established that previously humans and foreigners had been composed or had their essences imported into a Durance that would ultimately still have a direct connection to the domain, and this is where the particular quote, "find peace in the domain," came from. So within the Halo universe, at least to a degree, the soul does exist. But again, for the poem in its entirety, Cortana, if you'd like to continue.
Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase, each other. Does it make any sense? The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. going back and forth across the doorsill, where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. I would love to kiss you. The price of kissing is your life. Now my loving is running toward my life, shouting. What a bargain. Let's buy it.
I chose to explore this poem in slightly more of a rampancy kind of mentality, with rapidly fluctuating emotions from line to line, particularly in the close of the last 5 to 10 lines. Again, while rampancy was cured by the domain, and thus Cortana doesn't really possess rampancy, she's now fully sentient, and then suddenly being confronted with her own mortality and only having a few milliseconds to actually make decisions and react to the emerging situations, she still would have gone through all of the stages of grief that would have been normal for any human being or any sentient being who's aware of their own existence to go through on the moments approaching their death. Again, the difference being that Cortana is an AI and thus these processes happen millions of times faster than a human brain would. And as for the final quotes that we hear Cortana saying through the campaign, particularly in the silent auditorium, they fall as follows.
I feel certain that I'm going back again. So I'm doing what seems the best thing to do. You have given me the greatest possible happiness. You have been in every way all that anyone could ever be. I can't fight it any longer.
These are excerpts of the suicide note left by Virginia Woolf to her husband. Virginia Woolf was a particularly fascinating novelist, essayist, publisher and critic, born in 1882 and died in 1941, aged 59. She led a fascinating, turbulent, successful but trauma-filled life. She was afflicted by mental illness, which today would be probably diagnosed as bipolar disorder, but had no viable or effective treatment during her life. She published several books, acted and worked in a way that would be considered unusual for a woman in that era, and is widely heralded as being one of the primary inspirations behind the feminist movement and the allocation of civil rights and liberties to women. There are links in the description and at the top of the comments for further reading regarding Virginia Woolf, and I'd strongly recommend you pick up a copy of her biography by Hermione Lee. The reason I think Virginia Woolf's suicide note was referenced in this particular aspect of Halo Infinite's campaign as spoken by Cortana to the Chief is because, very much like Virginia Woolf, Cortana has led a very difficult and trauma-filled life, particularly her time spent with the Gravemind, which can be considered a time of madness or mental illness to a degree. And yet one of the aspects of Cortana's life that made it bearable was her connection to John, to the Master Chief, her love, so to speak. And this very much mirrors Virginia Woolf's life with her husband. While her life was difficult, traumatic, and plagued with mental illness, one of the things that she, quote-unquote, lived for from day to day was her marriage to her husband. The particular quote, "What I want to say is, I owe all the happiness of my life to you." Once you understand the story of Virginia Woolf, you understand that that really is high praise. She lived a very difficult life, and if she attributes all of the happiness of her life directly to her husband, that paints a very clear picture that her bastion of safety and comfort was with her marriage. And this can be mirrored or echoed in the relationship of the Master Chief and Cortana.
And as a final tribute to Virginia Woolf, and as some food for thought for the relationship between Chief and Cortana, I leave you in the hands of Kat Peterson, my resident Dr. Halsey, and the voice of Cortana for this particular episode, reciting the suicide note of Virginia Woolf.
Dearest, I feel certain I am going mad again. I feel we can't go through another of those terrible times. And I shan't recover this time. I begin to hear voices. I can't concentrate, so I am doing what seems the best thing to do. You have given me the greatest possible happiness. You have been in every way all that anyone could be. I don't think two people could have been happier. So this terrible disease came. I can't fight any longer. I know that I am spoiling your life. That without me you could work. And you will. I know. You see, I can't even write this properly. I can't read. What I want to say is that I owe all the happiness of my life to you. You have been entirely patient with me and incredibly good. I want to say that. Everybody knows it. If anybody could have saved me, it would have been you. Everything has gone from me, but the certainty of your goodness. I can't go on spoiling your life any longer. I don't think two people could have been happier than we have been.
Thanks for watching. If I could respectfully ask, if you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you're told the second a new video hits the shelves. Hit this video with a like if you enjoyed, and if not, it's not a problem. And be sure to pop a comment below to throw me an idea on what you want to see next. Massive thanks to my awesome patrons, Spartan10148, the Metarch of my facility, Falcon, Prophet, Leon, Sylphia, Mikhail and Irrefutable, the monitors of the array, Darian, Flaming Halo, Cameron, Spartan0137, the Cave Potato, Andrew, Shia, Dakota and Ghost, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers, and all other patrons who have supported the channel and helped keep the domain operational. Huge props and recognition to Todd Morrison, Spartan137, Wesley Stuckey and Jacob Kemp for jumping on as Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members. You guys are epic. Shout out to John for reasons. And if you want to help support the channel and score yourself tons of perks and merch, head over to Patreon or consider becoming a YouTube member. Links, as ever, are in the description. Much love. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.